Welcome back, everybody, to yet another edition of Behind the Brew. And today we are here to talk about our newest beer kit, the Philly Weisse. Philly Weisse is based on a very historical style, the Berliner Weisse, but in this case we use a newer yeast strain which actually develops the lactic sourness during the alcoholic fermentation, so you don't have to use any lactobacillus in your brew house, so you don't infect any other batches in your fermentarium. We're about to hit the brew cave to show you what we did to make this beer happen, what ingredients we used. But if you do like these videos, you like to see what we're brewing, what we're up to in the brew cave, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and you'll always keep on top of what we're doing and what we're brewing. So Philly Weisse is our take on the historic Berliner Weisse. Now, Berliner Weisse is a really old style. It is sometimes referred to as the champagne of the north, as it was a beer brewed in the northern part of continental Europe, in Germany to be specific. So it is a barley-based beer. It is light in color. It is low in alcohol. It's quite effervescent. It's super refreshing. So you could kind of compare it to a sparkling white or a champagne, if you will, hence the name Champagne of the North. And to make this beer happen, what we did is we, took a look at historical beer recipes. Turns out this one is incredibly simple. We are using 50% pilsner malt, 50% wheat malt, both of which are sourced from continental Europe, Germany specifically. So this is traditional ingredients for this beer style. And we also add just a dash of Hallertau, just enough to give it about 4 to 5 IBUs and a little bit of that floral, noble hop character, just a little bit in there to complement the malt. And the beauty of this, the Philly Sour yeast, is that it does produce lactic acid during the actual fermentation, so you don't have to worry about using any actual lactobacillus in your brew house. That can always lead to unwanted infections of lactobacillus in other batches, and then you end up with beers that are sour that you did not intend to be sour. So this stuff is really cool. What it does is actually produces lactic acid in the very early stages of fermentation based on how much glucose or very simple sugars or glucose-based sugars there are available for the fermentation. And the lactic acid is produced generally within the first 48 to 72 hours of fermentation. So in this recipe kit, you will find that there is 5 ounces of corn sugar or priming sugar that is included in the ingredients and is on the instructions. And the sole function of that is to allow this yeast to metabolize that to produce the lactic acid during the early stages of fermentation. That's what's going to give you your sourness. It's a really cool little trick, and it works really well. We can tell you that the pH of this beer finish got down to 3.4, and that is a very pleasant tart acidity on the tongue. It's super refreshing, especially combined with the really light body, the effervescence, and the fresh bread kind of malt profile. So if you are brewing the extract batch, that 5 ounces of corn sugar is going to give you that glucose base that you do need for the lactic acid production. If you are brewing this all grain, you are also going to add that 5 ounces of corn sugar to get the glucose-based sugars in there for this yeast to work on. Another trick you can employ is using a very low mash temperature. In this case, we recommend 150 degrees. That will favor the formation of much simpler sugars during the mash, and those simpler sugars are what the Philly Sour is going to turn into the lactic acid and give you your sourness and characteristic tartness of this beer. Another thing to keep in mind with this yeast is an elevated fermentation temperature. The warmer you get it, the more efficient it's going to be at producing that lactic acid. Lallemand does recommend a temperature of 68 degrees to 77 degrees Fahrenheit for this yeast at standard pitching rates, which we do recommend. 1 packet per 5 gallons is a very good rate for this beer. And in our brewing trials here at WHQ Northern Brewer, we did ferment this at 77 degrees right at the top end to see what would happen, and there are no off flavors. It's super clean, other than the lactic acid, obviously. Lallemand does not recommend using Philly Sour for bottle conditioning because that dose of that simple sugar, so the dextrose that you use to prime bottles, will be consumed by this, and it will create mostly more lactic acid and a little bit of ethanol and not a whole lot of CO2. So any results you get by trying to bottle carbonate with this is going to be a little, you don't quite know what you're going to get. It could work out. You might get some really flat bottles that turn out a little bit more sour than the initial batch. So the recommendation is to use the CBC1 cask conditioning ale. You will add this at bottling along with your priming sugar, get that beer into bottles, let it sit like you would any other batch. And now this one will produce those really nice fine bubbles, get you a good effervescence and perfect carbonation every time without producing more lactic acid and ethanol. Philly Weisse is available on northernbrewer.com, as always in both extract and all grain versions. And if you like the Philly Sour yeast strain and you've done some really cool stuff with it, leave it in the comments below. What did you brew? How did it turn out? What are the flavors? How did you like it? And what do you think you might brew next with it? This is just what we came up with, and we really hope you'll enjoy it. I know we do around here. It's easy to brew, it turns quickly, and it's absolutely delicious.